Hello, Madeira girls. Welcome back to Mrs. Graham's Modern World History for Mod 6. I can't believe this is our last mini lecture of Mod 6, and it's going to be about the Rwandan Genocide. Now, I totally apologize that we only have one day on this. I think that ideally we would have like a week. We were supposed to have two, but it was totally my bad. I thought that we had class on Friday, so I had planned to do this on Wednesday and Thursday. But it turns out the mod ends on Thursday. We do not have any classes on Friday. Okay, so the Rwandan Genocide is absolutely very difficult to discuss because it's very horrible that it happened. The good news is that there are a lot of college courses offered on it, so whatever you don't get now, you can take and try to understand in a few years if you're interested. So there are two groups involved here living in Rwanda in Africa. You can see where Rwanda is on the Africa map, well, any Africa map, but also the one that I posted on PowerSchool on the sidebar. So there's the Hutu and the Tutsi. And these two groups are physically identical, for all purposes indistinguishable, and for decades there was no difference between them. But next door neighbors knew who was who, and like the people in their communities, they knew. The Belgians, who were the imperial power in Rwanda for decades, saw the Hutu as a labor force, and they saw the Tutsi people as more European, but this was totally a construct. So, in 1959, the Hutu uprising displaced the Tutsi after centuries of Belgian colonialism and Tutsi privileges. In 1962, so a couple of years later, Rwanda officially declares independence from Belgium. And the Hutu, who overthrew the Tutsis and the Belgians, the Hutu were now in charge. And between 1962 and 1994, relations between the groups were not good, but they were also not genocidal. So, in the early 1990s, a plane crashed, and the plane had a president in it from a neighboring country who was sympathetic to the Hutu rule and supported them. And the Tutsi people likely shot down the plane, or at least the Hutu said that they did. So they took, to say that they overreacted to the plane being shot down would be an understatement. This is one of those events, kind of like how the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, because of a variety of factors, propelled the start of World War I. The start of the Rwanda genocide was because this plane was shot down. And so the Hutu people, the military, the police, and complicit Hutu used machetes to kill 800,000, nearly a million Tutsi people over the course of only a few months in 1994. In the Rwandan genocide, the majority of the population was involved. So this was not just like a couple of minority groups killing each other. This dominated the country and killed all of those people. Europeans reacted by evacuating white people, basically Europeans and Americans. And so remember, this is like after the UN is set up, and technically there's a Declaration of Human Rights. So UN forces in Ethiopia acted to contribute towards stopping the genocide. But once some of the Hutus were expelled from Rwanda, where they were killing all the Tutsi people, a cholera epidemic broke out. And Western media at the time in 1994 was portraying how bad and sad the death of all these Hutu people to cholera was. And of course, massive deaths, no matter what, are highly unfortunate. But the Western media totally ignored the Hutu killing 800,000 Tutsi people. And even when people started to pay attention, like after there was a trial in 1996, it was portrayed as like small tribal groups having like a history of tribal warfare or something, and totally erases the reality that the colonial force we know, Belgium, had divided these people against each other, which led to the extermination. The reason that it eventually became called a genocide is because the Hutu used machetes with the explicit purpose of exterminating all of the Tutsi people. So some Tutsi people today are missing limbs, or they have a gash across their face, and that is because they were targeted with machetes during the genocide. Today, Rwanda contains mass graves because so much of the population died so fast. There are museums there depicting the piles of corpses. In addition to the 800,000 dead, survivors, whatever few Tutsi were able to survive, were severely traumatized. And through the early 2000s, a civil war continued in the Republic of the Congo, sometimes known as Zaire, where a lot of the refugees from the genocide ended up, both displaced Hutu and Tutsi refugees. Most recently, in 2012, 1 million people were convicted of genocide in that region. And in 2014, they established a national flame of mourning to commemorate. Today, these people are known as Rwandans, not specifically Hutu or Tutsi, and like many genocides and extreme tragedies, people are still grappling with the trauma and the death on such a wide scale. So today there are not differences between the Hutu and the Tutsi, because after all, those differences had been imagined and exaggerated due to colonialism. So here concludes my mini lecture on the Rwandan Genocide, which is also the last mini lecture for Modern World History 3 Mod 6 2020. Thank you all for coming along on this journey, and I'll see whichever of you are available to show up for tomorrow/Thursday's optional class meeting at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a good night.